Hello, today I'm going to be talking about radio and accessory audio quality training, specifically with regards to radio best practices that will help ensure intelligible communications. The radio best practice information that I'll be discussing today can play a key role in ensuring intelligible communications, no matter if you have an analog system or a digital P25 system. This training will cover what the issues are. It will discuss radio and microphone best practices regarding the lapel microphone angle and hand position, the mouth distance to the microphone, and how to speak in a loud, clear voice. And then finally, we'll sample actual test recordings and video that were taken in the field by actual customers. So first, what are the issues? The first issue is the reduction of transmitted speech intelligibility when operating in a noisy environment. So the more noise there is in an environment, typically you would have a reduction of the speech intelligibility. Also, you can have a reduction of the radio intelligibility when you are receiving or listening in a noisy environment. So again, the louder the audio, the harder it may be to hear the receiving audio from a radio. Also, at times, the received audio can sound muffled and can be described as unintelligible. This may not necessarily be happening when you are transmitting in a high noise environment or when you are receiving audio in a high noise environment. So what are some of the radio and microphone best practices that you should follow? So using best practices along with optimization of the audio settings within the radio, you can have greatly improved communications through your radio system. But basically what this all comes down to, or one way to look at it, is about developing and maintaining good habits for radio communications. It's about developing muscle memory. So how can you train to improve the way that you use the radio products? Motorola Solutions has provided a 15-minute best practices video that basically goes through 3 different aspects of the International Association of Fire Chiefs Best Practices documentation. This is a great training tool that can be given to the radio users. It's 15 minutes long and it provides the necessary information to make sure that the users understand what proper best practices are. So let's talk about the lapel microphone angle and the hand position. The first recommendation is to make sure that the user's hand does not cover the speaker or microphone port area of the remote speaker microphone or of the radio when possible. The APX lapel microphone port is actually the entire speaker grill area. The reason why the microphone port is the entire speaker grill area is to help diffuse the wind noise across the microphone port, and this in turn increases the wind noise performance of the lapel microphone. So what does this all mean? Looking at a previous version of a remote speaker microphone or lapel microphone, you can see that the microphone port is on the top portion of the face of the microphone. Newer APX Impress lapel microphones, the microphone port area is the actual speaker grill area on the face of the microphone. The little slot that you see just below the M and the O of Motorola is actually not the microphone port. Why is this important? This is important because when you actually grip the microphone with your hand, typically you can cover the entire face of the microphone port if you're not careful or if you're not aware that that is the microphone port. If you were to do this with the older previous versions of lapel microphones, you would still not cover the top microphone port area. But on the new APX Impress RSMs, if you were to cover the bottom 2/3 of the remote speaker microphone face with your hand, you would essentially be covering up the majority of the microphone ports. So keeping the same muscle memory from previous remote speaker microphone versions and using that muscle memory with the new APX remote speaker microphones, you can cause muffled audio because of the fact that you may be covering the majority of the microphone port itself. So let's look at different hand usage positions. This is using the remote speaker microphone with the right hand. As you can see on the picture on the left, if I were to use my right hand to hold that microphone while cupping the face of the microphone, I would be covering up the majority of the microphone face, or specifically the majority of the speaker grill. This would cause muffled and unintelligible audio. The middle picture and the right picture shows proper best practices for how to hold the remote speaker microphone with your right hand. The recommendation is to try to grab the bottom part of the remote speaker microphone with your bottom 3 fingers. And depending upon how you're holding the microphone, either using your thumb or your index finger to PTT the microphone, using the index finger or the thumb to brace the side of the microphone. Using this type of technique will ensure that the front face or the speaker grill of the remote speaker microphone does not get covered. So let's look at the left-hand usage. Again, the same thing. The picture on the left shows you what not to do, which would be covering the majority of the speaker grill with the hand as you try to press the PTT of the remote speaker microphone. The middle and the right picture shows you proper technique for holding and using the remote speaker microphone. Again, holding the bottom part of the remote speaker microphone head, basically where the cable connects to the head of the microphone, and then using either your thumb or your index finger to PTT the microphone while bracing the opposite side with your thumb or index finger. Using this technique will ensure that you get clear, intelligible communications through the radio system. So looking at a police officer here, you can see good technique and bad technique. On the left, you see the officer cupping the front of the microphone even though he's using his thumb to PTT the radio. His head is turned towards the remote speaker microphone, but because his hand is cupping the majority of the microphone face, you will tend to get muffled audio. The picture on the right shows proper technique, again grabbing the bottom part of the remote speaker microphone and using the thumb to PTT the radio. Now let's discuss the mouth distance to the microphone. So the key for intelligible improvement is to hold the radio microphone 1 to 2 inches directly in front of the mouth when possible, or turning the face of the lapel microphone towards the mouth, or the third option would be turning your head towards the face of the lapel microphone. The idea is to make sure that the speech of the user is being directed towards the microphone ports of the lapel mic. Using a retractable micro attachment is a recommendation to help facilitate the use of radio best practices. This allows for better use of the radio microphone. It makes it so that it's easier to place that microphone in front of the mouth without having to unclip the lapel microphone from a location on the shoulder. We recommend using the GearKeeper brand as it has been shown to be very reliable for past customers. The last part of radio microphone best practices is speaking in a loud, clear voice. So a key for intelligible improvement is to make sure that you focus on the volume and clarity of the voice. You want to speak in a loud, elevated, but not necessarily shouting, clear voice, which will help produce the best transmit audio quality and intelligibility. This means projecting your voice into the microphone port. Now let's go ahead and sample some actual test audio recordings and video that was taken in the field, when following best practices, and what can happen when you do not follow best practices. The first example is an officer chasing a suspect. So what you'll see is a short clip of a video of the officer running, and then you'll hear what happens when the officer is covering the microphone face while talking, and then following best practices.
And people that don't know we're doing this, they're watching them outside.
So now, what would the audio sound like if the officer is holding his hand across the face of that microphone?
Academy 1100, 110/40/30 on foot. I got a white male suspect, red shirt, blue shorts, Oh no, I'm guessing it this time.
So that audio sounds muffled, it's lower in level, and it can be somewhat unintelligible. So what happens when the officer is following best practices and leaving the microphone face uncovered while talking?
Academy 1100. I'm 43 with a white male suspect. Red shirt, blue shorts. We're at Beam coming up on Shopton Road.
So that audio is much brighter, it's higher in level, and it's much more intelligible. The next example is a high noise example. So you're going to see two videos. The first video is when the user is not following best practices in a high noise environment. You'll see the actual environmental conditions, and then you'll hear the radio communications. So although the user was talking in a loud, clear voice, he was not talking into the microphone face, and he wasn't projecting his voice into the microphone port. So what happens when the user follows best practices in a high noise environment? Again, you'll see the video and you'll hear the ambient background noise, and then you'll hear the radio communications that would have been heard in a control center type of environment.
This is only a test before the roll-off audio quality test. Go ahead, you ready for 397? Let me get you the stroke, LC, 397 up on the hill. Right now it's 60%. I'll put it in manual, close it, and open it back up.
So even in a very high noise extreme environment, the radio intelligibility can still be good as long as you follow radio best practices. Holding the microphone 1 to 2 inches in front of the mouth and speaking in a loud, clear voice, projecting your voice into the microphone port. You can also see that the user was using a retractable microphone attachment, which helped him to facilitate radio best practices. So let's summarize these radio best practices that we just discussed. So we know radio communications can be very difficult in high noise backgrounds and in stressful situations. The optimization of the radio settings and software can help to improve radio intelligibility in these situations. but radio best practices will dramatically increase the audio quality and intelligibility of your radio communications. It's also one of the easiest solutions to implement with the most positive impact to all your radio communications.